Endless Evolution is a community engaged in the exploration of human experience. We engage with one another to understand our unique paths. We talk, we laugh, we heal, and we invite others to share this journey with us. Won't you join us? Endless Evolution.
So many humans, and where's the humanity?
Good afternoon, gentlemen. How are we today?
Oh, yes, we are good in the moment. We are good now. I'm good now, seeing your smiling faces.
Well, we're here again for
That's this moment.
episode
We are here.
5.
We are
Episode
here.
5. I think we've
Yeah,
made
yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah.
Episode
Yes.
5 of
Yeah,
Endless Evolution. And
yeah.
again, here to give you our thoughts and reflections on lots of different things going on in our world, but also in our lives. And to kick it off, we're going to hear from Spencer.
All right, everybody. Welcome to the space one more time. Thanks for coming in. Remember, if you like what you hear, subscribe, whatever social platform you're on, do that for us. We're going to talk about perspective today, and I think we have a good show. We're going to talk about some of our personal experiences and how that has created and changed and informed our perspectives, and put that in a context where I think it can help us all, particularly in the times we're in now. And so, yeah, let's talk about perspective a bit. And we think that perspective can help us all invite each other into transformation if we're able to open ourselves up to perspective. I think it can help us build community a little bit if we realize there are maybe even some of the same truths, but different perspectives, different ways to build, different ways to strategize, different ways to see things. And so we don't cancel each other out because of different perspectives. So we're going to talk about it in a way that can build community while still honoring the individual, but really talk about collective perspectives that we can adopt, and the way we can expand our perspectives as well. And so we'll do that, and then we'll invite you to do the same thing near the end, and even as you listen to what we're talking about. And so let's just shift a little bit, because I think we all want people who are listening to not just take a message from us, but maybe to look at yourselves as well, and to really challenge yourself as you're listening to what we talk about. And so hopefully it'll make you look at your own perspectives, interrogate how you see things and the lens you see things through. And so, Nay, I'll start with you, where you're at. I mean, I know life is lifing for all of us, right? It is. And so what's the journey of your perspective? We're all evolving with some healing humanity, evolving humanity. So how's your perspective change that continues to change in these times?
Well, so much, is going on right now in our political and social world.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm inundated daily with different perspectives, not only from the media and social media, but from my personal life. Within my own family, I have people from varying perspectives and opinions around the realities that we're living. Some think it's horrific. Some think it's the best thing that's happened and that it's needed to happen to kind of reset our country and put it back on a path of prosperity. And so I recently have kind of been inundated on my personal life with different perspectives, right? My son was hospitalized. I mentioned that on the last podcast. 2 family members passed away. So I was in the midst of deep, like, grieving, crisis, and emotional kind of upheaval. While the world feels like it's falling apart around me. And so that gave me a perspective of like what really matters the most right now. Uh, has to be my connection and focus on my community and my most intimate loved ones. In that moment, it was my son, and then my larger family with the deaths and supporting them. And it allowed me to kind of shut out the rest of the world and give me perspective that a lot of that is noise and confusion and intentional um, tactics to unstabilize us, right? And to throw us off our game and to make sure that we're at odds with each other. And if we can just block it out for a moment and focus on what matters,
Mhm.
we can demonstrate a lot of love with one another and a lot of healing and support of one another. And that's hard to do unless something throws you into a moment where you don't have a choice, right? So I feel like the perspective I was offered by that month, all of February, was really challenging for me and my family. Um, Gave me the ability to, the privilege, honestly, to block out that rest of the world and focus. And so I wonder, like, what can we do in our daily lives to intentionally block out and focus? How do we block out the noise and focus on the relationships with our brothers, sisters, mothers, fathers, cousins, friends? And how do we focus on figuring out how to build community with the people in our lives who have different perspectives? So recently, my family took a trip up north to go snowboarding and to spend some time with my in-laws who have incredibly different perspectives than I do on the world and on political, strategies and on what's best for our long-term and short-term future. And we had two really, 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 really intense days of conversation and dialogue. And it allowed me to offer my perspective and it allowed me to hear their perspectives. And I think what was interesting was that most people get into heated arguments and walk away from each other and sometimes never come back to each other, right? We've been kind of conditioned to avoid certain topics with family, avoid religion and politics, and right, because it can create a lot of tension and you want to stay close to your family, so don't have those conversations. And I think we've been conditioned in the larger society to do that. And there's this belief because if you do that, things will get too hard and you won't be able to repair the relationship. So the perspective that I had was that it's only when we lean in to those really hard conversations and then stay committed to each other, eat dinner together still, be under the same roof, show love and concern, help out with projects around the house, cook dinner, run errands for one another, help out with childcare, all of those things brings our humanity back into focus and allows the conversation around the different perspectives to be just that, right? And even though the very opposite perspectives could be that their beliefs feel like a direct and personal attack on the livelihood and well-being of my family, right? So my same-sex marriage is under attack. The Medicaid that my son receives is under attack. The rights that I experience as a woman are under attack. I can go down the list, right? My intimate friends who are all black and brown are under attack and I'm still breaking bread with people who feel like they have to support those attacks for the larger good, right? And I it's a fascinating perspective for me. And I needed to hear it and I needed to engage with it because unless I do that, I'm making up stories about their why and I'm putting them in boxes and I'm lumping them together with other people based on what the media is telling me about those who support that side. And that's not fair to them, but it's really not fair to me either. And most importantly, it's not fair to humanity because the more we isolate each other into the stereotypes and the ideas that we have about each other, the less able we are to connect and actually focus and bond on what really matters. So it was hard. Those were not easy days. They were not easy conversations. Emotions got real intense and heated. But at the end of the day, we returned to the love we have for each other and the support that we have for each other. And I was intentional about keeping humanity at the center of our conversation and bringing our humanity back in focus with each other. So my mother-in-law, I got the impression that she's not used to having such heated conversations that end well or that end with people still wanting to be in community with her, right? She was really emotionally moved by so many of the things that were said. And yet I could still take care that of her. That evening we cooked dinner together. We were like, hand in hand doing all the things together. And I think that shook her, but in a good way. It shook her to say, oh, wait a minute, our humanity and love for each other might mean more than all these beliefs I'm holding on to. And I've got to continue to show up for my family and now maybe question whether what I'm practicing and what I'm believing in this political realm and in this social realm is standing up for my family or not. So February's been a month, let me say. And and I'm still healing from that isolation and that really intense grief that my family was going through. And I believe that having those intense conversations with my in-laws was also part of that healing process because I needed to come back out of that isolation, and I did. And I was inundated with all of the things that are happening at our federal government and international relations level and feeling really on edge. And knowing that I was going to spend a weekend with people who support all of those actions or the politicians that are enacting those changes. And I needed to have that moment to return to my humanity with them and hearing their perspective and offering mine to them, I think afforded us the ability to center our humanity. So that's a little bit of what I've been going through lately. How about you, Aaron?
Yeah, wow. And as you know, Spencer and I have both, been at least on the fringe of this journey with you, just checking in, making sure that you're okay and letting you know that we're here when you need us. Um, it further helps us to understand and lean into that we need each other in community, even if it's just, hey, friend, thinking about you, praying for you, wishing you well, that sort of thing. Um, my journey around perspective has taken sort of maybe a turn that I didn't realize it was going to take, and it's helped me to understand myself better and to understand other human beings better. And it it really centers around, I don't know if he'll ever hear this or not, but it really centers around my relationship or my lack of a relationship with my biological father.
Mhm.
Um, for my whole life, I was so angry at him that he wasn't around. And I was so angry that he gave his life to the US government through the armed forces and in his mind spent protect in his mind he was protecting the country or what have you, but couldn't protect his little boy growing up in 80s Detroit, right? And so I was so angry for years, and I thought I had forgiven him, and so I kind of put it out of my mind for a little bit, and I went on with my life. Married a beautiful woman, had beautiful kids, what I might call a successful career, but it felt like something was still gnawing at me still. And I hadn't seen my father in like 20 years or so. And I saw him last year. And I'm point blank, I said, I'm 50 now. I'm a grown man. Don't BS me anymore. Tell me the truth. Tell me, just give it to me. I can deal with the truth and then we can move on from there. And he said I was not a good human. I was I was a killer. I was used to killing people and I had that mindset. And it, it, I felt like at that moment when he was telling me the story, like something, he had lost a part of his own humanity and didn't feel like he could be around me, um, in my formative years to give me the type of love and tenderness that I needed. And so it changed my perspective. Like, I felt, even though I'm, still dealing with some of the anger and the pain and all of that, it changed my perspective on how to forgive him for what he did or what he didn't do because of what he lacked in his life. He went to Vietnam at 17 years old. And I can only imagine what that would do. Like you're still growing at 17, like your brain hasn't fully developed. You're still growing and you're sent to, in essence, kill other people on a different continent and different for whatever reason. Maybe he didn't understand what he was doing at that time. But like he was telling me that he had turned into this person that he was not, that he didn't know he could be, and he couldn't give that to me. And so, I started relating that story to how because I had been going through life looking at people like, oh, they did this to me, and they're a bad human being because they screwed me over, or they're a bad human being because they said this thing to me, they did this to me, without knowing or hearing their story or their motivations or the things that drove them, the things that they were feeling pain about, or they hadn't forgiven about themselves, or didn't even understand about themselves. I was always looking outward, saying this person did this, rather than trying to understand what made them behave in certain ways, what made them say certain things, what made them believe certain things. So I started to apply that conversation that I had with my father over this last year to every situation, whether it be political. Like, I started, even though I struggle, don't get me wrong, I struggle with understanding some of the motivations of people who might, support this new fascist regime that we see developing before our eyes. I struggle to understand why someone who might look like me, who might be, who might come from the same neighborhood as me, who might have some of the same interests as me. I struggle how you could support that. But what I, what I'm trying to do is to understand their perspective. Why do you support that? What is it that appeals to you about that message? Uh, how does that help you out, or the things that you love, or the people that you love? How does that connecting to that ideology help you? Uh, because they might feel that it does, and and I have to accept that. But it was interesting to me how my own personal journey through pain and through forgiveness and through understanding of the people that I love, applying that to a larger perspective about humanity. Why do certain people feel like they have to obliterate another group of people off the face of the earth?
Right.
Why do I'm not condoning it or excusing it. And I would continue to protest against it and advocate against that. But I want to understand what makes human beings behave in certain ways. And so when I think about that perspective, or a different perspective, in a sense, not to say that I mute myself, not to say that I don't speak my own truth, but in order to understand someone else's perspective, I have to suspend mine just for a moment
Yep.
to connect in a place that we can understand.
Yeah. You got to listen, right?
Yes, absolutely. And it is hard when you like, I believe you are absolutely wrong,
Yep.
but I have to listen. That's one of the most difficult things that I've had to do in my life, is to do that. And so I'm trying to apply that into all areas of my life, whether it be um, I grew up as a Christian. I have been spending a lot of time with people of other faiths, and I'm seeing all my life I was told that, you know, Muslim people are wrong, or Islam is wrong, and it's not God's religion, and all of that. And I'm seeing, like, I'm spending a lot of time with some, you know, people who are Muslims, and I'm like, they're more like me than some of the Christians I grew up with,
Right.
because I'm allowing myself to hear their perspective.
Yeah.
I'm allowing myself to see the points at which we connect.
It's interesting, Aaron. I just want to comment that I think a lot of people conflate listening and contemplating other people's perspective as agreement with it.
Yes.
And I just want to take this moment to really highlight the difference, right? So, seeking to understand does not mean seeking to agree with, and does
Yes.
not mean seeking to support. And because people conflate those things, they stay away completely from the seeking to understand, because
Yes.
they fear that if I even entertain another perspective, I'm somehow allowing that perspective to penetrate my mind and to take over my thoughts. And I think we should entertain perspectives to just consider them and question our own, but it doesn't necessarily mean we have to agree with them. So I listened to a lot of perspectives that weekend with those 2 days of intense conversation. I didn't agree with most of them, but it gave me insights, like you said, and it gave me insights and understanding as to their why, which allowed me to humanize their behaviors and their decisions in a way that I could not before. So it's really a benefit to yourself to seek to understand. You don't have to agree with it.
Yes,
It's the action of seeking to understand and actually considering and opening your ears and hearts to another perspective that sometimes enriches your own and sometimes
yes,
strengthens your own, but you've got to hear the other in order to do that.
absolutely,
Yeah.
Man,
absolutely.
Naomi, you just that you both just hit it right on the head. And I want to come back to you, Aaron. I don't know if you finished, but I just thought of this quote. It says, "It is the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it."
Mm,
You know,
love that.
an educated and enlightened mind to be able to entertain it, not accept it. Aaron, you still talking about your perspective? I certainly wanted you to
No, I'm done.
finish the talk. Yeah,
That was it. It's just it. I just want to put a pin on it.
yeah.
It just, in this political environment that we're in, we're like, you know, I'll speak for myself. I'm shooting these facts at people. I'm like, you don't know your history and you don't know this and you don't know, like, this is proven. Like, why? And like I said, that my journey is more of my my ability to be able to speak to those who think different politically than me. Just it is marked by my own personal healing journey, and it's something that
Mm,
I'm looking at within myself. What is it that I'm not able to accept? Because Naomi,
mm.
I do just that, and I'm reeling against that. Like, when I disagree with somebody, I'm like, okay, I don't have to talk to you anymore. Like, no, that's not the way to, like, you need to actually talk more. You need to actually engage more. And
And that's hard as hell. Let
it
me just say
is.
that. It's hard.
It is. It
So to
is.
our listeners, this is not easy, and none of us are perfect at it. This is a practice like everything else. It's like riding a bike. You get better the more you do it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a practice.
Yeah. Like I would always get into these discussions like, okay, I'll just shut up then. Like, I won't talk to you. And
Yeah.
and that's not it. And I know that probably comes like at a as a coping mechanism, and we all are uh we all use coping mechanisms at some point that we may be unaware of. And the moment we become aware of it, that's when we can start changing and start looking at ourselves other than looking at other people. 'Cause we're not going to change anybody else. We're only going to be able to change ourselves. So, yeah, the pin in it is that it just this my ability to understand and hear other perspectives is marked by my own personal healing journey.
Yeah, that no, that's good. And I really resonated with what you just said too, because it was my coping mechanism for years, to run away, emotional shutdown, to just shut down, be like, F you,
Hmm.
I'm out. I'm out,
Yeah.
whether it be relationships, whether it be conversations, and didn't want to do that. And it hurt me, right? It hurt me because it never opened my perspective. It never gave me the skills to really go in and address tension and be there and allow. You use the word allow, and allow myself to be there, and then surrender, to surrender my own perspective or my need to be at the center, or be heard. So all those things in life that you all mentioned resonate for me, because my perspective seems to be that too, and shift like that. Naomi has been knowing me for a long time, and Naomi knows that it seems like in my life, grief and loss has been a theme. I remember 20 something years ago coming in here, so and so in my family passed away. So and so, it's just from age 17, it's been a theme. Grief has been a theme. And like you, Naomi, within the last 3 weeks, we've had two losses too, and and Erica's family, which in extension is my family, and right before I went out of town and those things. And so, yeah, it really just opens you up. And I found myself thinking again to myself, how many, that how many of us can live with the end in mind? You know what I mean? That live in a certain, that quote that says, "Live like you're going to die tomorrow, but learn like you're going to live forever." And so, I mean, um, y'all, you know what I mean? I don't want to be morbid, but his perspective is, if things can happen any day, then I want to be righteous. I want to be kind. I want to be loving. That's the way I want to be. And if that's, I don't want to be the perspective. I don't want to, certainly, if you're a believer in whatever religion you believe in, I don't want to be on my deathbed, scrambling to make amends with people before I die. I want to do that now, if I can. So that really continues to change my perspective when you think about loss and grief and things like that. And then too, being able, the last time we were on with everybody, I was in New York for Restorative Justice Conference, Peace Circles. Then we left and went to Cartagena and then spent some time there. And I think, or I know, my perspectives continue to be changed from intentionally putting myself in places where I'm going to learn something different. Doesn't matter what age I am. I mean, whether that's from going to teach at a different school, whether that's embracing different friends, inviting somebody different to the table, in that same, when you invite people to the table, you take them off the menu. You know what I mean? Because you're fellowshipping with them rather than criticizing them, rather than talking about them, having them on the menu, so to speak, as if this group of people is all bad until you get ready to do that. And so sitting in those circles, which was a deep training for 3 days, sitting in these circles and just processing and talking about justice and restoration and reconciliation, bringing up your personal stuff, but sitting with people who are Asian, who are European, who are Latino or Latinas, you know what I mean? Just being in those circles and then realizing that there's a universal truth here. There's universal values here. That circle there, perspective is what life is. What we have here, this is what life is, not what's happening out there. And so to be in that and to really realize, man, those who don't tend to do that, I think you said it, who don't tend to do that can easily say, all these people are like that, or they are just like that. But I've and being down here in Georgia, and even being down here in Georgia has opened my perspective, and I've met many white folks, who are sincerely and authentically interrogating themselves and living for the cause of justice, that I would be in the trenches with, more so than some brothers and sisters I know who are not. And I would be in the trenches with them because it's about this energy, and it's about this who you're striving to be on the inside, and all the work that we're doing. It is a struggle. It is a struggle, but I think for me, all that continues to change my perspective and look at it in a different way. I'm looking at, personally, you all, I'm looking at, I've had a chance within the last, and I've tried to do this, call people when it's possible, from my past, and make some amends, and that's not saying everything was my fault in the relationship. That's not saying, it's just making amends where I can. And that feels good. It feels good to be able to do that, and it doesn't matter whether someone, listen, fine, they don't have to respond, don't, but it's about me doing that. And I think it's easy to think about the harm that's happening to us and the harm that has happened to me, and not look at the harm I caused too, or the harm I caused. And so it really opens all of this really opens my perspective, and it doesn't happen if I isolate myself and withdraw and say F everybody else, and do that. It just doesn't happen. And really surrendering myself from the center. Um, and I'll say this last thing. I think we mentioned it before at the end of our podcast before, that if, and we'll talk about it later as we offer these ideas, um, that if you want to open your perspective, if you can invite somebody to the table into your home, read about their perspective, read about different perspectives instead of centering your own, right? As if yours, as if your experience is the center, and just the one truth. Because there are many. And so when I did go to Colombia, I understood and began to understand. I sent Naomi a message. I was, man, when you understand the history, you start, understanding them, and you see all the architecture, you know what I mean? You realize how small our country is, and how young it is,
Mm-hmm.
you know what I mean? And how materialistic it can be as well. Because, I really think people here, I mean, when you talk about poverty and poor, that there's people you look at who can, by our standards, you say, wow, they live in poverty, but they're happy and joyful. You understand? People are
Mm-hmm.
happy and joyful because they're not living according to this perspective of we consume and get as much as we can. And that defines who we are, and our material possessions and our ability to acquire wealth and all that type of stuff. So um, um, I want to share this last story. Eric and I made some real connections with people who work at the hotel where we stayed, right? Because we just embrace people's humanity. I don't care what they do, And one guy took the opportunity to tell us. He was like, you all felt you all's energy when you first got here, and you all were just so kind and nice to me, and we generously gave out tips, not because, hey, we need to, it's just so we value you, and we value you. And so anyway, he said all that, but the last day we spent at the pool, y'all, just kind of chilling out all day at the pool. We weren't going to go out and explore, just wanted to do that. And so we were preparing to leave, and he came up to us. His name was Jimmy in America, and he said, "Are you going to leave? Can you wait here about 10 minutes? I want to give you all something, because you've been such great people." And we waited there, didn't know where he went, and so about 10 or 15 minutes later, he came back, y'all, and said, "I got something for you." He just took us up to the room. I thought he was going to give us a bottle of champagne. Took us up to the room. While we were waiting at the pool, he had gone up and filled our room with rose petals and put them all on the in the bedroom, leading to the bedroom. Put rose petals on the bed with a heart shape on the bed, and a little note that says how much he appreciated and loved us. And I joked with him. I said, "Jimmy, man, you're gonna make us change our plans for the night. You put the little roses. You're gonna make us change our plans." And we just laughed. And so he began to say, "That's what you all gave to me," and it was reciprocal. So later on, right, as that morning we were leaving, I pulled him to the side where Erica couldn't hear me, and I said, "I want you to know, in the last year, Erica's cousin was her favorite cousin, like a brother, was shot and killed by his adoptive son last year." I said, on Valentine's Day this year, a few weeks ago, her stepfather died. We had the funeral a week later. Then her uncle died a week later. We couldn't go to the funeral because we were in Cartagena. And I could tell him, and he was about to tear up, but the point I was making was that you just never know what people are experiencing, right? And so I just, it's just wonderful to connect from the heart, to live from the heart and connect from the heart. and have that change my perspective and start letting that be my truth, my
Mhm.
personal
Right.
truth, and though we're surrounded by all this, you feel all that. And so I think
Yeah.
about pivoting to what we can learn from these perspectives. And I just, what that lens has to offer. Naomi, you invited your in-laws in to seeing something different, whether that conversation finished or not, you modeled for them love and acceptance and compassion, and you didn't have to agree. And to the
Oh, we
point
didn't.
where,
Don't worry.
yeah, you didn't have to agree, but to the point where they didn't even know what to say.
Yeah, I think, when I was listening to both of you, what kept coming up for me was like a lot of people talk about in this digital age, particularly social media, the algorithm, right? The algorithm. If you only
Yeah,
see your own algorithm, you've got to
yeah,
do other things. You've got to
yeah,
intentionally look for.
yeah,
And prior to social media, we've all created our own algorithms anyway.
yeah,
Mhm.
Most of us continue to surround ourselves with like-minded people.
yeah,
Um, Oftentimes people from our same walk of life,
yeah,
whether that's economic walk of life, racial walk of life, right? Social
mm-hmm,
circles, community. And so our bubble becomes very small.
mm-hmm,
And unless we're real intentional with
yeah,
breaking our own algorithm, so this is in real life or online, it's impossible to consider other perspectives because it's only your perspective that gets
mm-hmm,
reinforced time and time again.
mm-hmm,
It might get shifted a little bit here and there, but the base of it generally doesn't get moved at all unless you're really intentional. So whether it's those circles you went through in New York
yeah,
or your trip to Cartagena, like
yeah,
you were doing intentional things to break your
yes,
circles. Aaron, you were
that's right.
doing intentional things to break
Wow.
your circles now
Mhm.
with interactions by looking at those other perspectives. And this brings up to me something I saw on Instagram, I believe it was last week. I'm going to say Pat Radical Therapist is the one who posted it. So I like to give people credit. And it was really this questioning of like, what are we doing? Are we creating communities or are we just reinforcing cliques, right? And
Mhm.
a
Wow,
number
that's
of
deep.
slides that this person posted around
Yeah,
what's the difference. And so,
yeah,
particularly in these times where there is so much to divide us, where it does feel like we're more juxtaposed than ever to one another. Are we just creating more clicks or are we truly creating community? Because creating community means you are intentionally looking for other perspectives. You are inviting in and not just calling out. You're not equating accountability to social shaming or social punishment. And I think so many of us, because of it's a protective instinct to
yeah,
surround ourselves with familiarity. Like if we dig into
yeah,
brain science, right, and we study this, we know that people tend to, sociologists and neuroscientists have studied this together around like socialization and acculturation and how this happens. And human beings tend to gravitate towards likeness. That
yeah,
is a
yeah.
socio neurological phenomena, right? We
Mm-hmm.
tend to gravitate towards likeness, but that does not result in the most enriched and powered brain, right? The brain that is powered the most, just to put it in the simplest terms, is the brain that can be exposed to lots of different perspectives and not just protected out of the likeness factor, right?
That's right.
So we have to remember that and say, what are we doing? Are we only filling up our in-person and online algorithms with like-minded people that are going to make us feel safe in these times of turmoil? I understand the why we do it. Heck, I do it all the time. Look, sometimes I find myself between podcast episodes going, shit, I gotta go listen to my own damn podcast and take
Yeah,
my own advice because
yeah,
I am not living into
yeah,
this whole like communal
yeah,
mindset because it becomes overwhelming and we're afraid and we feel attacked and we feel desperate, right? There's a lot of moments of desperation. My daughter called me. She's like, "There's this impending feeling of gloom and doom that I just can't shake, Mom. I keep trying every day to do meditation and positive intentions and focusing on how to build community. I just can't shake this impending feeling of doom." I totally relate. I said, honey, I've been like that for like 3 days straight. one of these days it's going to shake. You know, there's been times where I've texted one or both of you saying, guys, I'm losing my mind. I can't do this anymore. We're human. Our human nature is to go to protective mode, right? Like
Yeah.
fight or flight is real. But we have to do that grounding that we've talked about before enough to say, how do we reach out? How do we go break that algorithm, find other perspectives, listen to and engage in conversations with people who seem to be complete opposites of us so that we can have our brain firing
Yeah.
as richly as possible and as powerfully as
Yeah.
possible. So, for no other reason, think of it as a strength building tool, right?
Yeah.
Like, so if you need to be strong in these times to endure all of the challenging encounters and situations that we're facing, think of this as like a way that you're flexing your brain muscles, which is to challenge yourself with other perspectives, look at other ways of thinking and talking about things, consider other people's points of view, even
Yeah.
if they hit you in a place where you're like, there's no way I can even listen to this anymore. Force yourself to listen.
Yeah.
Do something because it's practicing and it's exercising your brain and your heart muscles in ways, your soul muscles anyway, in ways that just staying in your algorithm and in your bubble won't do.
It is a practice, Nay. I was thinking about this morning. So at that in New York, you know, you meet a lot of right. You at places you meet a lot of different people, and you do your consult. When we went to Focus Trail, and you meet a lot of people, right? And you exchange numbers, and you always say things. Oh, it'd be good. We'll keep in contact. You know, come see me when you're in Detroit, or whatever. So this morning, I intentionally text someone I met there. Right. Now, hey, I say, hey there, friend. I just thought about you. Want to say that hello. Hope you and the family are staying well. And I could tell by the way she responded, just like Spencer, with these exclamation points. So great to hear from you with these heart signs, right? And it told me what her family was doing, asked me how my trip was because she knew it was going. That might seem to be a simple thing, right? But I intentionally text her. It's one thing to say, we're going to stay in contact, we'll be friends, but it's another to intentionally create community. How are you doing? Invite, you know what I mean? That does it. That's at least a start.
Yeah.
You know.
That's powerful because it just, there are a lot of times when people are on my mind. I'm like, oh, I wonder how that person's doing, and I'll just continue to go on about
Yeah.
my day. But then I've tried to get into this practice of just what you did, Spencer.
Mm-hmm.
When I think about that person, just do it right then and there
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
my brain, it is firing a mile a minute, and I'm
Yeah.
going to start doing some other things,
Yeah.
and then a day or two or a week or 2 weeks will start to
Yeah.
go by. I, I wanted to say this, like I think yes, it's a human thing for us to really get caught up in the algorithm. And I think also it's a it's a vestige, one of the vestiges of colonialism that we don't look to community first as our default.
Amen to that.
Yeah.
We look to individual or our own interests as a default. And I'm not blaming any individual person, but because it happens to me, and I'll give a quick example. I was at a conference a few months back, and I'm in the vendor section. So everybody has their own booths, and we're like, hey, have a great conference. Hope you sell a lot. Blah blah blah. And my next door neighbor, my neighbor, I come in the next day, the second day of the conference, and she has all of her stuff hanging up on my booth. And I immediately got upset. Like I'm like, what is she doing? I'm gonna say something. And then our colleague that we were talking about earlier, he said, no, don't do that. Don't say anything. This is about community. You want her to be successful. And so when she came in that day, she said, "I'm so sorry. I had my stuff." I didn't say anything. But she had all of her clothing on my table. Like it was like I'm like, what? Okay, how do I engage in this conference because all of her stuff was on my side, and it quickly occurred to me, and she couldn't tell me what she was from the continent of Africa, but I can't remember which country she said she was from, quickly occurred to me that she may be used to in vending, having the support of her neighbor vendors to point them to her vending or to share their space, so that they all can be successful. And I know this is maybe like a turn from what we're talking about, but it changed
Mhm.
my perspective because I started to think, yes, I want her to be successful as well. And so this little, her infringing upon my space, if you will, is very little in the grand scheme of things. Like the fact that she hung her things on my booth and put her things on my table, that means nothing. That means nothing. But my colonial mindset pushed me to
Mm.
stay in your own space. Why are you, coming over here? Like that was my default. And I want to change that default to the more communal aspect of uh, the more building community, so that that is not the issue. That is this
Right.
our space, our personal space, our hearts and our souls. We don't close them in so much that we can't let people in.
Aaron, I
Mm.
am so glad you brought that up because,
Yeah.
this touches on something Spencer said earlier before thinking about people from other countries, inviting them to the table, right? It is really hard, even if you have a diverse friend group here in the United States of America, if they've never had exposure to, if they spent their whole life here without other perspectives of living and other cultures of other cultures function and do things, particularly cultures that do not come from westernized capitalist countries dominant, which is hard to find now, by the way, because
Hmm. Hmm.
capitalism is a world disease. It's not
Mhm.
um, something that's just in westernized countries, just in Europe and the Americas. It's everywhere. So it's really hard nowadays to still encounter cultural practices that break from colonialism and capitalism, but they exist in the villages and in the towns and amongst
Yes.
the people. And so maybe not the governments, but amongst the people, you'll still find practices. If you're not exposed to that, you can't even fathom, right? That there's other ways of doing things. So
Yes.
Spence, Aaron and I were on a webinar the other day, and it was about how to center Black children in education. It was a great webinar, wonderful. But both of us had like side texts going on in conversation about even within that, it was so quickly seen and so visible to us how easily a lot of the people in the webinar, both in the chat as well as the speakers, started to default to um, Black capitalistic power, right? So it wasn't
Mhm.
even just about centering Black kids in education. It was like, how do we create our own wealth and how do we go here and how do we make sure? And their default was, again, colonial thinking of
Mhm.
not communal thinking, right? And there were
Mhm.
there were voices there which were like, how about we break out of the institutions that we know and go back to communal practices of education and teach
Yes.
people around a table and in community centers and at faith institutions. And so it was a wonderful conversation to kind of witness, but it's so easy for all of us. So I
Yes.
love that you brought this up, Aaron, because it's so
I do
easy for
too.
all of us to fall back into what we've been conditioned and socialized
Exactly.
in, which
Mhm.
is that colonial individualistic
That's right.
approach to life
That's
and not the communal approach to life.
Yes.
Mhm.
And so many of us have not been exposed to it. I feel very privileged that I grew up in a family and in a culture, the Lebanese culture in which I grew up was very communal.
Yes.
We grew up putting family and community before individual need at all costs.
Yes.
So I feel very privileged in this society to the point where when I engage with other people who've never been exposed to that, I'm kind of like flustered. I'm like, there's other ways to do this. And then I realize, oh, they've never been exposed to that. And there's that other perspective. They've
Mhm.
never had a community-based perspective.
Mhm.
Um, so I think it's imperative that it's not just invite other people to your table, but truly invite people who've lived and been socialized outside of this country
Yes.
in some type of communal culture that does not replicate the practices of this country, no
Yes.
matter your ethnicity or background.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
man. Man, listen. who was that? Audre Lorde that said the master's tools will never
Mm,
dismantle the master's house. And so
absolutely.
you can't use the same tools. And I think that is, you said the best colonialism when you talk about the pains and the trauma from it, because instead of like India Ari says, come back to the middle, right? When you have this one extreme, so like this, the idea of progress is we'll go to the other extreme,
Right.
you know. But I don't care if it's Lebanese liberation, I don't care if it's Black liberation, I don't care if it's Latino indigenous liberation. That if it's not in the context of human liberation, it's just siloed, it's just
Yes.
isolated, and it ain't gonna work. It's just
Absolutely.
it's just gonna be mirroring the same thing that we've already been living in. Now that's great. I've seen the same thing, and it hurts me, and like you said, Aaron, I struggle too. Yeah, I struggle because when I feel myself feeling pain sometimes and feeling that pain, my mind does want to default. Man, you know what I mean? Nobody who cared about what was happening to the Haitians, who cared
Mhm.
about what was happening to, Rwanda, who cared about what was happening to, and then that's a whole nother thing when you talk about the darker skinned people around the world, particularly in this country too, who feel, discriminated against within their own tribe.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And so yeah, it is such. So I think it is such a deep thing and continued interrogation, um, um, a continued interrogation to kind of just chip away all the stuff that we've been swimming in too, just like
Yes.
white folks have swum in supremacy. I've swam in male training, male
Absolutely.
indoctrination, and Americans in America, all this American stuff, man. So um, I think offering people ways to open up their perspective is what has to happen here. Because as I was doing that reading, Naomi, I don't know if you suggested this book to me, but I took it and I was reading it. The God Who Riots. Who was that? You or one of you? Someone, but I took it with I think Ramon. I think his name is Ramon Garcia, sitting over there. But it's called The God Who Riots, and there's something about embracing the radical Jesus. And so it was so good that he had a reminder of he reminded me of Paulo Freire, who said,
Oh yeah.
that all this transformation is going to come from the bottom.
Yep.
It's going to come from the bottom.
Well, right, and it has to come from us
Yes,
truly breaking free of colonial institutions and
that's right.
mindsets and
That's right.
depending on, so like,
Yeah,
you can find really great resources out there. There's wonderful resources. Um, the Working Family Party is pulling together a ton of resources of how do we depend on each other, but there's a lot of great influencers and content creators on social media that offer you great
yeah,
ideas. And one of them that I came across was like, so how do you start doing this? How do you break when the
yeah,
empire is falling? What do you do? And
yeah,
so I offer these for all of us to consider. How do we break from institutions? There's been boycotts, right? Boycotts of Amazon, boycotts of Walmart, boycott of Target. That's great. But how can you, within your community, say, hey, I know somebody who's a plumber, and if they do the plumbing and I can do the cooking, we can barter each other's skills, and I don't have to hire the institution to do this, and I don't have to hire that skill set. So how can we really, elevate local and community resources so that we don't have to buy into capitalistic, conglomerates that are really driven. They're not humanity driven, right? How do we take control over our food? We
yeah,
all, those of us who own land, have the ability to plant a damn garden. And if not, there's a lot of community gardens. How can we build our own gardens so that we're growing our own food? So, people across the suburbs of Michigan, I'm sure it's everywhere. I know
yeah,
our friend Stephanie, our dear friend Stephanie, has chickens, well, had chickens.
yeah,
Some possums got to them, so that's a whole different story. But, how do you have chickens and have your own eggs? Egg prices are become a non-issue if you're having your own eggs. Like, so we can do things to lean into community and lean into this communal way of life, even within this very capitalistic
hmm,
colonial structure. How
that's right.
can we, recycle our water? Like we have a water capturing system, one of those big barrels, we can reuse that to so that we're not running up our water bills by just plugging it into the pipe to have our hose spray other plants. There's lots of things that you can do to figure this out. And then, of course, survival techniques. Uh, Octavia Butler in her books go through this. Around what can you do to survive? How can you create fire? How can you cook in the wild? How can you help light the way for other people? There's ways that we can look to our ancestors to learn these things, but also we don't even have to go that far back. We can look at the Great Depression, we can look at occurrences across the world and other crisis situations where
Mm.
people turn to each other to survive. And so we can start practicing those things, not just for survival, but to thrive and redefine who we are as a society and really center our humanity and evolve in that way, right? So instead of evolving for more and more technology that keeps us more and more isolated from each other,
Right.
how can we evolve together,
That's right.
building community and depending on one each other?
Yeah.
So that vendor depended on your space to be able to spread out and figure out her stuff. And that was okay, Erin, for her to figure that out. Because then she
Right.
recognized it, she brought
Yeah.
it back together, and she probably would not have had any issue with you spreading out your stuff because
Right.
it's just a different mentality and
Yeah.
mindset.
Absolutely.
And so,
Yeah.
how do we lean into that more? So, I just ask
Yeah.
all of us to think about it, but of
Yeah.
course, all of our listeners to say, how can you start bartering your skills, your
That's right.
resources, growing
That's
your
right.
own food, figuring out how to support each other, so we don't have to become increasingly dependent on all of these institutions that are just driving us towards isolation.
That's
Absolutely.
right. That's right. That's the way to take the power away. That's the way
Absolutely.
to do that, because you ain't gonna force nobody to change their
Absolutely.
force their oppressor to change his or her, you know what I mean? But you take that power by doing that. That's empowering. So man, that's good, Name.
It
That
is.
that is good. I
It
think
is.
that might be a wrap. Nay, I know you have a quote. I mean, because I think that quote you have is so powerful. Um, um,
We do
as
have a quote, but before I
um,
leave that for
okay,
anybody else, is there any other final thoughts that we want to share with anyone or with our listeners?
I just want to say really quickly, just continue to look within yourself first. This whole podcast and the reason why we came together, not the reason why we came together, but what evolved out of our coming together was to do the self work. How do we evolve as a group of people? But then how do we do that individually? So I just want to continue to encourage people to look within yourself and start to interrogate why you think certain things, why you have certain perspectives, why you behave in the manner that you do, and that might help you to understand other people a little bit better.
agree. I agree, Aaron. That liberation is found within first,
Absolutely.
and so that's where to start, man. I couldn't agree more.
Awesome. Well, I'll move us to our quote because I think we've talked a lot about different perspectives. So we always like to leave you all with a quote just to kind of sum up where we've gone, but also give you a lead for further thinking down your own path. And so this comes from Stephen Covey, believe it or not, which kind of shocked all of us. Not that Stephen Covey's bad, but very much focused on individual improvement. And
Okay.
so it's odd that we drew a quote from such an individualist to really think about how to build community. So Stephen Covey says, "We see the world not as it is, but as we are, or as we are conditioned to see it. When we come and open our mouths to describe what we see, we in effect describe ourselves, our perceptions, and our paradigms. So if we want to build community, we've got to open up ourselves to see other things, right? Because our perspective is really just our mirroring outward. And so if we want to build community with others, we have to not just speak, but also listen. And so we invite you all to spend, the next few days introspectively thinking about what can I do to reach out to grow my community and to listen to others to shift and build my own perspective into a richer, more powerful firing of my heart and soul and mind all together, as we evolve and hopefully heal humanity in the process.
Yeah, heal humanity. So if you're listening, remember to just keep healing, keep evolving, and stay in community. Amen.
Amen. And much love
Absolutely.
till
Peace and
next
love.
time.
Amen.
All
Peace and
right.
love.
All right. Take care, everyone.
See y'all later.
This episode of Endless Evolution is brought to you by the No Harm Organization, uplifting wholeness and humanity. Our featured music is Humanity by Lava Laru.